So today, just something to change it up a little bit. Zach, Paula, and I are going to be talking about what we wish we had known early on in our DOO careers and what we would go back and do differently. And then, of course, we'll encourage everyone to join in. So, Zach, would you like to start us off?
Yeah, I can jump right in. Man, there are so many different directions we can go when you think about this topic and what it means. And for me, it really was around the org chart. And I think starting there and really developing that plan, I've said it before and it comes back up to me because I hear it so often in teams, but you can't hire your way into profit. And so many teams I work with, one of the questions we have is, hey, let's review your organizational chart. What does that look like now? And what does it look like in the future? And there's always like a massive amount of buyers and listing specialists on there. And then you're looking at their current staff and you kind of review their minimized life by design, what they need. And there's such a gap, right? We have so many agents in this company that are on teams with director of operations that aren't hitting their goals. Right. And I had that on my team as well. Right. I went through that phase where right off the bat, I was like, no, we got to hire this amount because more than likely they're only going to do this amount. And we need to make up that gap. Right. Instead of hiring to the culture and making sure that we had standards and not suggestions. Right. And that's the bottom line. And I think the emotional side of it for me is we all have a little bit of that. We can help them and we want to help them. So we become on this savior side of it, right? To where like, well, we're going to coach them through this and show them how. And what you learn is that culture and how they fit in your culture really can't be taught. It's hard, right? If my culture is I lead generate and I get up and I hustle and I do that for 3 hours, it's hard to teach somebody that culture of, hey, you need to come in and lead generate for 3 hours. It's going to be a battle when you go through there, right? So we get in this thing where we're like, oh, every week we're talking about this. And it's really because we have folks on our team who are out of culture, who are not in sync with what we want. So what do? We look to hire our way into profit, right? We're like, well, let's just find some more agents to bring on the team, which puts a lot of pressure on the operations because now we don't have enough leads to even support the amount of agents we bring in. And suddenly you find yourself, instead of everyone having a bold team, right? A business objective, a life by design, we have a lot of struggling agents and additional coaching and us trying to find ways around that by hiring ISAs to set appointments. Now we've got like cyber backers to get the leads in the system. And we got these big labyrinths of org charts, all because we didn't hire somebody who fit our culture of the way we wanted to do business. And we made sure that they hit their goals and that they live big. Right. And if we, and that's not right or wrong, whatever your business, whatever your culture is, it's just finding somebody that fits there because you can't convince somebody to do those actions and activities. That was my number one.
I agree with Zach. So often we see the potential in the agents and they don't live up to their potential. We can see it and yet their actions don't go to where their potential is. And the other thing I thought of as you were talking is those times that we did have talent on the team and we were doing really well, we kind of relaxed and stopped looking for the talent because the talent was giving us what we needed in the moment. And the other lesson I learned, because it just takes one of those talented people to leave and then all of a sudden you've lost something great. So just always be looking for the talent.
Zach, bring in the heat with his.
Bring in the heat. Yeah. Well, Paula brought up an awesome point too. Like, man, I love Paula and the questions and the thoughts she brings up through her conversation because as she was talking about that and she said, hey, we have talent, we always should be looking at it. I think a lot of that's the mindset too. It's really not recruiting. You're looking for like business partners who are talent that you're going to partner with and help them grow their business while they grow yours. You know, and I think that was a great point that Paula brought up about always be looking for that talent, for that partnership. It's not just recruiting to recruit. I mean, I got a lot of soapboxes, Megan, if you want me to get on a few more. You just let me know.
I love it. Paula, did you have an additional one, or was yours really also hiring?
I was going to say my number one thing was around all 4 models and actually understanding how they all talk to each other and that long-term goal setting. So when you look at that 5-year, like this is where we want to be in 5 years, and taking all those 4 models and having them talk to each other and having it come backwards in time. So you clearly know each year what you're doing, how you need to grow so that you can hit that 5-year goal.
That was almost my number one thing, Paula. I changed it though, so good thing.
Question for you on that, Paula. What would you say, like if you're setting a 5-year goal, what should the goal be? Should it be unit? Should it be how big your team is? Should it be profit? Like, because obviously if you got one thing, then you're working backwards. What should that one thing be?
And that is why all 4 models talk to each other. So if you know what your GCI is going to be at that point, you can use the budget model to work back into the org chart, to work into the economic model. Like they all talk to each other. So if you know what your income goal is going to be in 5 years, what that goal is, then you have the tools to tell you everything else.
So I hear you saying start with profit. And lock it back in.
Yeah.
I love that. If anybody wants it / doesn't have one, I've got like an example 5-year out one that's like, it's a beast though, y'all. So if you are like, no thanks, pass, you don't hurt my feelings. But if you want like an example total beast 5-year one that walks you through like, when do I hire my EAs? Like when am I looking at my next account manager? When would I need my next agent based off fall through rates and all that? I've got one already built out. So just drop your email address and I'll like send it out. Or maybe you know what I'll do? I'll put it in like we did last time.
Okay.
Once we launch this, I'll put it in the documents and I'll just say, hey, just put that document I referenced in this video in the documents in Facebook. It is just an example. It's not gospel. So don't take that like it's just some team's version of do it. You put your own numbers in other words.
Does any teams on here have a donation goal or anything they do outside of Day? Like any type of philanthropy?
Dan on here,
that you
Dan
do?
on here.
We do. We're still building it. However, I'm in Mazatlan, Mexico. And so one of the things that we, on our 1-year goal, is to give a family in need a home. And by our 5-year goal that we're doing 5 families and so on and so forth as we grow.
That's awesome.
That is awesome.
So that's part of what I would look at when doing that. I think it's profit, and I think it's what does your team want to accomplish as far as a collective big why, right? And the cost of that plus the profit, you could really build a significant goal backwards to see what you need to do.
I love that addition, Zach. Like I've got another team, Deanna, might be a good connection for you, Leah. And their whole big why, like the whole thing the team gets around is it's really their donation goal. And so their goal, I think this year is $150,000 that they're donating to basically a inner city program for young adults. And so they're like way passionate. Like every single member of the team is like, they don't talk units. They talk how many dollars to how many kids did we help? based off the donation goal. So that is a really different way to drive your 5-year vision, you know, like going and coming back in. Okay, I guess that makes it my turn. So mine that I ended up on were kind of two things. I cheated. But the first truly was ownership. And like I was on the team that I was on before I made the jump full-time into coaching for 5 years. And that was a very long journey in a short amount of time, really, because I went from EA to DOO to DOS. And it probably took me 2 years to really realize like the difference between perceived ownership and real ownership, and to make the switch in my head from perceived ownership to match my reality. And I wish I had done that on like day one. So not day one, but maybe day like 91 after my initial, you know, onboarding. So I had a lot of control, and I didn't, but it was not explicit, right? So like my Rainmaker did not say like, you have 100% control of everything, but I did. And I perceived I had control only over my domain. Like, this is my thing, that's your problem. Like, that sales issue is your issue, like this is my problem. And so I had a different amount of control in reality than I perceived that I did. And once I figured out I had control over the whole really 5-year plan, to use like Paula's thing and work that in, it changed everything. Like it changed everything for me and for the team. So it just became so much easier, like both mentally, emotionally, like in actual results to run the team once I matched up my perceived control and my real control and took the reins and ran with it the way I could have been doing the whole time. So that was a huge, like I wish I had connected that earlier, or maybe asked more questions to my Rainmaker about what % of control he wanted me to have over that, and then fill in what that was, because the truth is it was 100% over pretty much everything. So if I could go back and do it different, my question would be all the time, like, what % of control are you wanting to give me here? And I would ask that like sometimes a day, every time you've said anything, if I could go back and do it all over again, because I would have gotten to understand the reality versus perceived reality a lot better. But then the second thing is, once I adopted that and I realized like basically the whole team, whether it was operations or sales, was under my domain. The second thing that if I could go back and do it again with the knowledge I have now, is I would remember that conversion rates are the key to unlocking the profit you want to have. And so it took me till maybe year 3.5, almost year 4, to really understand the value, like the incredible value of conversion rates. I'm very mathematically minded, like I love math. And conversion rates are just a math problem. And so once I understood that, and I understood the value of that knowledge, then it became easy to design educational programming for the agent team around what I wanted them to improve on. And then it was easy to measure success. And did this work? Nope. Okay, canning that. I'm going to put in this new thing. But it was all in the conversion rates. So if we wanted to improve something, we went straight to conversion rates. We analyzed how we were going to improve it, and then put a plan in place to get it done. Whether that was that cold leads, like just listed to just sold to neighborhood farms, to database sphere, conversion rates the key to unlocking your profit goal, period. Culture too, that's all important, but but math, it's math that's important. Yeah, those are my two things really, that if I could do it all again, I'd go back and focus on the things that I really.
You might want to mute Lacey, Paula.
It is interesting. I think part of the learning curve as you are in this position longer and longer is every single number tells a story. And it's figuring out what story all those numbers are telling us.
Yeah. It's very much in alignment, because I would agree with what Megan said. I think understanding those conversion rates, because my number 2 is I wish I would have got a handle on the database and simplified the way we communicated it, like right off the bat. Right. And I think when I first jumped in, like it's almost like a pride thing where we're like, oh, we got like 75 touches or 60 touches, right? And we don't know what the return of that is, or we can't discuss at a high level what's the open rate or click rate, like, or what's the content. And I think if keeping it simple, following a 36 touch just to start with would have helped tremendously, and then executed at a high level before, go figure what Gary Keller tells us, adding creativity in. And what we see is that creativity is added in, and we have these huge touch plans, and we don't know how they actually convert to, like what Megan's saying, to an extent. We don't know what that conversion rate looks like, or how our clients are interacting with those from the database on a lot of things. We're just sending out communication.
Yeah, that was, for me, that was such a key thing. And you could change everything once you understand the value of conversion rates. But you have to have the information. So being able to get it, and then knowing how to interpret it and how to make tweaks to your business are the next level steps there. So those are our 3 things. I don't know about you guys, but I already have a full page of notes from Zach and Paula. What about you guys though? So we've got a wide range of operations here. What are some things you guys maybe would, if you could go back and do it again, you'd change that one thing, or you'd do different?
Can I ask a question first?
Oh yeah, sure. Always.
Give everyone else time to answer, because if I ask the question, I don't have to answer, right? When did you guys feel like you hit like a ceiling in something and went from actually your E to the P? And what did that look like?
Every day. No. Specifically, let me tell you specifically something. But just to give that some validity, I hit so many, like it wasn't just one, that it's like this huge epiphany. It was, I hit them all the time. So it was either a person or a system or a leadership skill that was needed to really like push me through. So just to bring it into the thing that I brought to the table. So to keep it consistent with that, when we were looking at agents, like we were really wanting to get agents into production quickly, like anybody, right? That's the whole thing. These people come to you and then they won't stay if they don't sell. So money means they stay. So, we were kind of beating our heads against the wall, and then I took that over, and then I was beating my head against the wall by myself, because now it was like all on me. And I just we were bringing people in. It was a slow slog into production. Even if they were right cultural fit, like they were getting on the phones every single day, it was just this slow slog. So really hitting this ceiling, we could not break past that. And it wasn't so much an epiphany. It kind of was. It was really that I was breastfeeding and then on a long car ride. So I'd had no caffeine, but I was on a long car ride. So I stopped for a coffee, and then it was like I had taken drugs. So there's kind of that involved too. But I had my mind exploded, and I started thinking about what would, if I just threw out all the rules, what would I do? And if I'm the leader here, how would it look different? And that question was enough to push me break through the ceiling. But I had to realize that I had control. And so it wasn't just this, God, if we could get the right people, gosh, if we just had somebody who would train these people, oh my gosh, why can't we just get people on the phones? When I stopped asking those questions and I realized, what if I had 100% control here? What would I do? And do I have 100% control? And I realized the answer was that I did. And I created a plan that looked different and was really uncomfortable for me. And so basically I stepped into ISA because I needed to understand what it was like to go get on the phones for 2 or 3 hours and call people and figure all that out. And then I could help create a faster into production system, which I did. Called it the 8-week challenge, and it got people into production in 8 weeks. But I had to go figure it out, and I didn't want to. I had been hitting a ceiling because I was like, I'm not interested. I don't do sales, which is a total lie because I come from sales like before I was in real estate, but I don't do sales, like all the things you tell yourself, and you just hit the ceiling, hit the ceiling, hit the ceiling, hit the ceiling. And for me, it was the ownership, and it was, what would it look like to actually get in and increase conversion rates, and how will I know how to do that if I don't just jump in and do it? And that was one of my E2P moments, because I had literally like regular ones. Does that help? Did I answer your question at all?
And I agree with Megan. It's not like there's one thing and then all of a sudden you're flying. It is lots of little, which is maybe what you're feeling, Cameron, if that's what you're feeling. It's not like you're going to break through the ceiling and you're going to skyrocket. It's like you break through, have a little epiphany, hit another ceiling. Break through, have a little epiphany, hit another ceiling. It's that constant improvement.
Yeah, it's more of like reflecting. Like, to me, I think my journaling or just reflecting, and I'm not a consistent journaler, right? Like, I'm more of the, like, I'm at a high stress point, I need to journal and think this through. And it's in that reflecting, I think a lot of times you realize that you actually broke through, right? That you really moved from E to P. At least for me, that's what I felt. In the moment, small little things, it was my feeling of relief that, like, great, I have this figured out, right? I didn't quite realize I broke all the way through, but I just felt confident, like I got this figured out. A great example was around looking for talent and building the team. Like, I had conversations with Megan, and I was struggling at first, right? I was like, I do not want to do this. I don't care for it. And I felt like it wasn't my job, right? I'm like, I came in to be a director of operations, and then having those conversations and partnering with someone just outside to give you a different perspective, like, made all the difference in the world, right? Like, I had that relief, like, okay, I have someone to talk to. I kind of have a game plan. I had a MAPS coach as well working with it. And then you reflect a month later or 2 months later, and people are calling and asking you, like, how do you do that? Or how are you recruiting at a high level? And I'm like, what just happened? Like, I guess I was doing it well, right? I mean, that's the way it works. Like, you look back and you're like, I've passed what I was looking to do and make it through. There's so many examples. Another, was simplifying the role, right? Like, I really do think that simplifying things as much as possible is where you get the greatest success. And I did not make the connection at first between the 411 and the calendar. Like, I had my 411, but my calendar was still controlled by everyone else. So that is another example of an E to P where I started viewing that as an investment. And where would I get the greatest return of my investment on time, and how can I leverage everything else? And once I had that breakthrough, I really started executing on a higher level, because I knew what my 20% was, because of the time I invested, I would get a certain output, right? A result that I could track and look through. So it's all those little moments, right? And now, like, in my market center, I get to teach how to do that, how to schedule, how to go through on 411. And it's not that I'm anything great. I just did it enough to where now, reflecting, I'm like, yeah, I'm real purposeful about it now. It used to be entrepreneurial. Now I'm real purposeful about where my time goes. And I think you truly can only do that through reflection.
Can I point out something you said, Zach, that I thought was really like a worthwhile point just for everybody? Like, Zach, like when Zach said, and Megan and I talked, like, what you should know about that is Zach and I were not MAPS coaches at the time. We each had MAPS coaches. I had like 3, I'm not even joking. And Zach and I were also, like, outside of that, we were doing just like calls around recruiting, because we were both recruiting at the time. And I was talking to Zach, I was talking to another MAPS coach on a regular basis. No, sorry, she became a MAPS coach, but she was not at the time. And then a third person on different topics, but they were like little miniature accountability / mastermind partners for me. And so like it's hard to move from E to P in an area if you're not getting like people who push you and challenge you and who talk to you about different ways to do things. And it does not have to always come from a MAPS coach. In fact, a MAPS coach is only a person. Like you sometimes might need 4 or 5 reliable people around that topic to really produce a breakthrough who challenge and push you.
100% agree with that. Because I had a very similar experience to Zach. Like recruiting fell on my plate. I did not want to do it. I'm like, this is not what I'm here for. And actually it was my best friend who was that accountability partner who pushed me into doing it. And I had the same experience that you did, Zach. Like I blew my goals out of the water. I ended up absolutely loving it. Like it was my favorite thing to do.
See, you are more P than me. I never got to my most favorite thing to do. So, see, I got another ceiling to break through already.
Well, anybody else have questions?
Well, I was going to say, so did that answer your question, Cameron, or do you have any follow-up questions to that, or anyone else?
That was awesome. For a bunch of notes, which is weird for me because I don't ever write notes. So that's telling you something.
I have a question for the group, if I could.
Yeah.
Could one of you, or really any of you, is there a time as your team grew and expanded where you encountered, I would say, expansion challenges as an admin team? So either you grew too fast or maybe not fast enough, and you had some, stress or some friction points that developed because of that? And if so, was there anything that you found effective with trying to solve those problems?
Who wants to go first?
I think we've all had that experience.
I
So
think that's like a constant.
yeah. Paula, you can go first. You haven't had a chance to go first yet.
Well, what do you want to know about that? Because I do think that's a constant because we're constantly in flux. I don't think we're ever exactly where we want to be.
Yeah, and that's kind of a fair point. I think that's one of the challenges we have right now is, we're on the smaller side admin-wise as our transactions grow. We're encountering what we think are natural friction points with being able to, or having to do more with less time. And we're definitely trying to identify what that trigger is when we know we need to hire the next person, but now we're trying to sequence the growth and making sure that we're planning effectively for growth. And so, our thought is we're trying to, if we will, look a little bit into the future to see, is there a risk if we grow too fast or we hire too many people? What could go wrong with that? It's kind of hard to articulate, but we're just at this logical junction where we know we have to hire that next person for the team, and we're just trying to get as much input as we can before we do that.
Lead with revenue. That's always a hard question because real estate's also cyclical, right? So sometimes we get into those really busy months and we're all drowning and it's like, oh my gosh, we need another person. And yet after you get through those few months, everything settles down and you're staffed right. So there's other things to look at too, other than just, is this the right time to hire? And this all goes back to the 4 models talking to each other with what I started this whole conversation with. So if you have a goal, you're on track for your goal, you should know how your budget model plays into your org chart and is it right to hire that person?
Gotcha. Thank you.
I'll give you just like a story to go with that, Jose, in case it's helpful. And that's like in my second year as the DOO, we grew by over 120% in a single year. Like we more than doubled in units. And that was like insane, by the way. That's like not an average year. You don't normally like grow by over 100% year over year. So that puts so much stress on our everything, like on our people, on our systems, on everything. And it was an incredible growth opportunity for all of us. But what really happens is you bring the right people, and the right people bring the right systems. So luckily it wasn't a questionable operations team at that point. Like, I had brought on pretty quickly 2 operations people who came in. One of them was a not right at all, replaced him pretty quickly, and then we hit that huge growth spurt. And the people I had in the 2 chairs actually running the transaction coordination, listing coordination, were literally updating the system on an ongoing basis. Like, something I think people kind of miss from career visioning and everything, when you're looking at leads, listings, leverage, and then you think about leverage, and a lot of people go straight to systems. But if you actually listen carefully to all those instructors, including Gary Keller on the stage, he'll say, bring the people bring the systems. So if you're feeling stressed out, I would just say from my own personal experience, I would say, question first if it's the right people, and then equip your people to change, edit, update, have a rolling systems audit, just so that they can be empowered to go tweak your systems almost daily if you guys are having that sort of a stressor. And once your people say, okay, our systems are maxed out, we're maxed out, and your revenue says you can move forward, then you jump. Otherwise, you just kind of sit in the chaos, but empower your people to change and update and constantly be improving stuff.
Gotcha. Okay. I appreciate that. Thanks.
Yeah, the conversations I realized I needed to have really quickly with my operations team is not what is our system doing for us now, but is our system built to handle X number of transactions in the future, right? So we don't look at whatever the goal was this year. We're looking at what is the goal for 2021, and can our system support that? And if during a time of business right now, if we projected that we should be able to handle this many transactions per month, and then that's where I think the real opportunity was and is for a lot of teams now to really reflect back and go, where is our system have a dam or an issue that's bogging down or slowing up the process that wouldn't support this if we doubled our transactions? Right? Or wouldn't support this if we increase by 20%. So after you have those people, I would really interrogate, what are our systems built to? Our business today, or is it built for our business in the future so we can grow into?
Yeah, that's one of the questions I ask a lot. If your business was to double tomorrow, what would your systems do? Because then you start really looking at your systems and figuring out if they're scalable. And if your systems are totally dialed in and totally scalable, then that's when you start looking at people.
Yeah, and I think that's a great exercise. We actually just started doing that, of trying to model a little bit of if we increase our transaction count by 2, or sorry, if we doubled it next year, what immediately comes to mind as your friction point? Where do you automatically start panicking about because you know that you can't handle that volume? And it has helped us identify these are our limiting factors in the process, if you will. And we've got to find ways to fix those first to expand capability, because maybe it doesn't necessarily mean another person, but we need a better system here. And so that way we can do more capacity, or have a greater capacity with the same amount of people, but by reducing time and energy on them. So I definitely appreciate your perspectives. Thanks. It's one of those questions I always ask, and I feel like I can't get enough perspectives on it. So thank you.
For the benefit of everyone in the Zoom room too, could I just say, because I did not really realize the pervasiveness of this amongst teams until I became a coach. If everything we're saying to you, you're nodding your head and going yes, but your systems are not automated, i.e. that every single thing requires a human person to type the email, send the email, etc., then we need to have a offline conversation. You have not actually arrived at systems. Systems should be automated as much as possible. So if they're not, no judgment.
Sticky notes aren't a system?
No, and I mean truly no judgment. I've got a team who's on track to do 800 this year, and when I started coaching them late last year, I figured out pretty quickly they had nothing automated, nothing, guys, not anything. So there's truly no judgment. Like, you're never too big or too small to go back and say, whoopsie, I made a mistake and nothing's automated. Like, let's get it fixed. So, but if that's you today and you needed to hear this, there's your public service announcement.
I feel like the question for that is then, when is command going to handle systems?
It's which ones? I mean, if you're talking about 36 touch, it's ready. If you're talking about contract to close, we're actually being told by the product development team end of July, but don't hold your breath or anything, because, you know, technology.
Yeah.
I can say, from somebody who left Raleigh, North Carolina to come to Mazatlan, Mexico, be very grateful for the command you have, because we're about 5 years behind you, and I'm wishing I had never said a word when I was there.
Yeah.
Isn't that such a true statement? It's all your perspective.
Absolutely perspective, because I would pay millions of dollars to have back what I had 2 years ago in the US right now.
Well, we've got 20 minutes left. Anybody else have a story about something they're like, man, I wish I'd known that earlier, or a question for the group? What could we mastermind around that would be value to you in the last 20 minutes?
Or even a growth area you experienced.
Okay, tell me something about your recruitment program. What you did, what you do to recruit people. Like, if you could name 5 things. Here's my 5 steps that I start with.
Wow, you're going to make me go back to my 411 from how long ago?
You just said you're passionate about it, Polly. You've got this. We're counting on you.
One of the things I did is I went to Brokermetrics and I pulled all the agents within the range of production that I wanted. So I got a list of all those agents. I got all the KW ones. And I would have team members make videos of why they were on the team and what they got from the team. So it came from their perspective. And then I had them on a drip campaign. So every week I would send out a new video to everybody on that list, and it'd be a person on the team talking about the team. And then one of them was, we did a video in the office where we went through the whole support team, and everybody on the support team introduced themselves and said what they did for the team and what they did for the agents. So that was one of the things I did to recruit.
Paula, while you're thinking, so the first thing I did was look at my growth plan. And honestly, that was my first step. Like, what did I need to do to become better at recruiting? Which part of that was having that discussion partner with other DOOs who were doing it. It also was attending classes or sessions that would help me, right? Kind of giving me some scripts. The second thing I did was what Paula said, right? Pulled my list. So I gathered the leads that I was going to call, looking to convert to a contact. And then I developed, my plan was to develop a relationship. So I conducted a needs analysis, and we would go out to either lunch or coffee, whatever it was. And I didn't really give them the Kool-Aid of Keller Williams or our team, right? It was more just asking questions about their business and what they have. And then offering at that point, following up and offering classes or sessions or discussions that I think would help support the relationship and build it that way.
That's a really good point, Zach, because it does start with the scripts. And it's the scripts all along the way, because you have so many conversations as you're recruiting. So you have all those upfront conversations, and you even have those back-end conversations where they want to know how many leads they're getting, and that's not the conversation you want to have. So it's how to have constructive conversations that will draw them in, and they don't get stuck getting in their own way. So many agents come in and want to talk about splits, and all they're doing is getting stuck in their own way. They need to be talking about how much money they're going to make, not about the splits.
Kathy, I would add, like, throw out your whatever scripts you are using, either like to generate interest or to convert to appointment or convert at the table for recruits. Send them to Zach, because something that can often happen is you write them from your own perspective. Like if you're not using a pre-written script, and they start to sound very like what an admin person would want to hear. So it talks about security or, you know, the culture, and those are all good. But usually you benefit from an outside perspective saying, like, who are you recruiting? Like high D's, high I's. Okay, let's tweak the language here to appeal to the D of the I. Like, how much more money are you going to make on the team versus the average solo agent? Like, that's a D statistic, right? Like, so get someone outside of your, it's really hard to do this for yourself. Like, get someone outside all of your scripts and then let them give it a once over to tweak your language for personality type.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, mate, because it reminded me, another thing that I did is I actually had 2 meetings with my team leader. So I don't know what everyone's relationship is with their market center team leader, but they obviously, that's a main part of their job and their role. So if you feel that is someone you can reach out with, I actually met with them on several occasions to just ask, like, what are you asking? What are you seeing? And how do you go about it, right? What is it? What do the conversations sound like to you?
And Zach, that brings up another point too, which is key, is creating that relationship with the leadership in your office so that you can recruit back and forth. So if someone comes into the office and says, hey, I want to join the office, but I'm thinking about teams, you want to be foremost in their mind. And it's a give take. If you're recruiting and someone's going to be a good agent, yet not a fit for your team, it's a great handoff back to the office, and it goes in your downline. And then you know that they're going to be taken care of because you have that relationship with the office.
Yeah. Yeah, and I don't know what step we're on, but another step that I had taken or that I used to is I would find your lead sources. Like, what are your top lead sources that you're going to utilize? And if you only have 1 or 2, then you need to at least have that 3 to 5 range, right? Just like we would in our business. So I would identify and have a plan around what lead sources am I going to use to find these partners. So for instance, I had Indeed, LinkedIn, Facebook, and then my prospecting, where I would call and build those relationships. So those are my lead sources that I work consistently. So identifying what that is for you, whether it's Wise Hire or LinkedIn, like whatever it is.
I just had 2 other thoughts as you were saying that, Zach. One was I was actually running an ad for TC, and I ended up with an agent who'd been in the business for about a year and just was struggling. And she applied for the job, and as she and I are talking, I realized she was a much better agent fit. And so we talked about her joining the team, and she ended up being one of my best producers. So then after that, I would run ads for admin all the time looking for agents, because I would get agents coming in that were like, I have been hitting my head against the wall. I'm not just getting what I need. I'm not getting where I need to be. And so I want to stay in real estate. I'm going to look at admin. And yet they weren't really a fit for admin. They just didn't have the right guidance. So I had a lot of success with that. And the other thing I had great success with, your best recruiters are the other team members. If you can incentivize them and get them on your side to recruit, they're the ones out in the field every day. They're the ones meeting all the other agents. They're the ones talking to people all the time.
Yeah, and also you're not just the other agents, your TC. Asking which co-brokers they're working with who are responsive and right, that call that are really nice when you have a conversation is also a great resource and to talk to.
I would add to that list, because one of my top 5 recruiting sources was coaches, athletes, and teachers. They make like such good ISAs and agents.
Thank you.
That answer, Kathy?
Yeah, that's good perspective. Thank you.
Who else has a question? 11 minutes left.
I was wondering if Megan would give us an overview of her 8-week challenge to get agents into production quicker.
I will send you guys a copy in the files. But yes, I'll give you an overview. So basically, it's a lot of psychological stuff. So before you came in, like throughout the interview process, you knew this was about to happen to you, but you entered in to an 8-week challenge by which you had to get agreement from everyone who depended and relied on you in your universe that they were all in with you. Because I found that really early on, that was a key detractor from agents. I think it was more personally in their brain, like, oh no, I really have to do this because so-and-so relies on me, so I can't possibly lead generate from X to Y. So we got agreement on everybody in their sphere was agreeing on these terms. And then they entered in at 8 weeks, and really it was like the first 3 days they had onboarding, and it was like intensive script training and going over stuff with me, like very physical stuff, which is hard to do now, but I'm sure you could adapt it for Zoom, like language patterns and like interrupting like bad habits, like we'd throw balls and like do all kinds of like pattern interrupts and stuff to get them just into rhythms of scripts that they could use that were really basic scripts, and teaching them how to find the data they were going to farm. For our program, like you had to come in and generate nurtures before you could farm your own database, but before you could get like our appointments, you had to generate your own nurtures to prove you could convert. So they were mostly farming cold data, like just listeds, just solds. So we focused a lot around that. And then they had to agree to a certain amount of hours per week. So they could opt into like a 20-hour challenge, or they could opt into a 25-hour challenge or a 30-hour challenge. I usually recommended 20 to 25. I did have one coach, soccer coach, take on the 30-hour challenge and like totally crush it. But that is a lot of hours. So, you know, but so they opt into their hour amount, and then they're committed, they're locked in. So like they started the day with like a quick script practice. Like I met them there at the office because we were still like this pre-COVID obviously, but you could do this on Zoom. So like you met up before they got on the phones, they told me who they were going to call. We did a quick run of their scripts, and then they were off to the races every day. And then I'd break them halfway through the lead gen time, and everybody'd come back and we'd do challenges, talk about script handles for any of their stuff that they were going through, just generally like have a regrouping time and do a little education, and then they'd go back to the phones. And so they were looking for like specific conversion markers along the way. And in the 8-week challenge, my commitment back to them, so this is what made it work, was that every Friday we met and looked at their personal conversion rate, and where they were weak, we created like specific personal homework to change that conversion rate. So this is very hands-on. Like this requires a actual person to help run the team. So I had to batch them, obviously. Like you couldn't come on like any time to our team. Like you had to be batched in so that I could run them in groups. And it became popular enough that my whole agent team would opt into challenges. So not every time, because if you were constantly a challenge, like your life would be like, what? And then I'd half-time you at 4 weeks, because at 4 weeks, I noticed early on there was a decline, like right around week 3, there was a huge drop-off in productivity. So it took longer to get the same amount of dials and conversations, which means it's mental. So I started doing halftime, institute halftime at 4 weeks, where for like one day I took them like out, and we had kind of like a retreat-ish type thing. Like took them to lunch, or we went to a park or walked around somewhere, like, but we took a halftime, and then they go back in, and that fixed the valley in the results I was having. So it's intense enough that if for some reason they're really not a good fit, like they're not committed culturally to our value of being on the phone, that they dropped out like super early. But it was also intense enough that if they were committed and all in, that we could get them their first set of nurtures required to start actually taking appointments. And the happy like happenstance in that is that when you find nurtures, you're also finding deals. So there's a bell curve there. So if you found 30 nurtures, you probably found like 1 or 2 actual people who are going to buy now. So we paid them $50 per nurture, but the nurture had to qualify to our standards. So we had to know, like, including the motivation, which is actually key. So we were paying them to like basically kick them in the crotch every day. Because if you couldn't get the motivation right, they're not a nurture. And that's the hardest skill for a new agent to get. And it had to be true motivation. So that was a lot of moving parts, but that's the gist of it. And then truly getting to the motivation, just so we're like all clear and on the same page, is not like what they want, but it's why they want it. So if they said, gosh, I have a house now that's only 3 bedrooms, I want 4 bedrooms and I need a yard, agents would count that. And that's not anything. That's just what they want. So they're not sticky. Like the why makes them sticky to the agent. So then it was a lot of coaching and role play and scripting around what would be important to you about that 4th bedroom. A yard, interesting. Do you have a yard now? Is this a bigger yard you're imagining? Like it's really digging for the why and the what. And that was the motivation, and that made it worth $50 for them, for the nurture. So they could get, a couple grand just from the nurtures, and then they usually doubled or tripled that from the deals they found that were like ready to go right away. We were really strict, so you couldn't work those deals yourself. You handed them off to a senior agent who then you got to shadow throughout that process. And you got paid just like an ISA would get paid for the appointment, you got paid for the appointment. So you didn't get paid the full agent cut because we weren't going to turn you loose on contracts, but you got something. So it was enough, as a couple grand in our area, it was enough to keep people like in it because they could taste it and then move them into full production.
How was the team's production affected by doing that? When you did it the first time, what difference did you see in the production?
Huge difference. So this was like a targeted impact on, like I really owned the entry, which meant I owned non-database activity. So we took non-database activity from 4% of our business to 12% of our business just through this program. And that didn't take any time at all, because if you actually get people to commit to the activity, the business is there. But I didn't know that until I drank that coffee while driving and realized I had to go sit in and make calls myself. And if you've been on any of these, you've heard me say before, I also committed. So I time blocked in my calendar. There was days like every other week where I sat in on the floor. And so I would walk through and I would tell them things like, you're so pretty, and wow, what an amazing color that shirt is on you, because these are like high eyes, and they were getting told no, or like quit calling here, or put me on your do not call list, and the rejection is so hard for high eye. So I was a lot of pouring back into their cup. Or if I heard that they were not on track, I'd pull them off the floor and we would go do one-on-ones in real time. So this was a huge time. Like, I understand that this is a time commitment. When you hear me saying this, I get it. But I would pull them off in real time, which would keep them from having a meltdown on the floor, which would negatively impact my numbers for the day. So I had to get them off the floor. And then we'd go work on it one-on-one. We'd go out to my office, to the patio, whatever, until their energy was back, and then they'd get back on the floor. So they were still making calls, but they were doing it with me. And then once, like every other week, once a month, once I had been doing it a while, I actually made calls on the floor with them so that they could hear what it should sound like. Because I didn't have any, my Rainmaker was not going to control the program. So I didn't have somebody like training them how they should sound. So I had to do it. So I would actually get on the phone, and then if you were on track, like if you were winning at your 8-week challenge, you won all of my appointments. So you got my appointments for the day. So that was the motive, like a little extra gamification of it. Worked for us, but it was a very comprehensive, like all in. And I will put in the documents like what is an 8-week challenge, and then we just ran a tracker. So they had to keep track. It's only 8 weeks, but they had to do it like every single day, keep track of their numbers and report back in, so that we were running real-time conversion rates. And it's real easy to see who's struggling. Like 1% conversation to appointment set, man, they needed help. 2 or 3%. 1 to 3 is the average new agent conversion rate for appointment, like cold call to an appointment. So I wasn't disappointed if they were running that, but if they ran that in weeks 3, 4, 5, 6, like they really were if they couldn't get above 1%, I knew I would lose them. So it was a lot of focus on that first conversion. Does that answer your question, Kelly?
Megan, I've seen a lot of people taking notes, and I think they all tapped out. They don't want to follow that.
Agreed.
So, Megan, I've heard you talk about it before. However, what I just took away, like the biggest aha from what you just said, is motivation is not what they want, it's why they want it.
Right.
And I think that that's something that we need to start stressing with our team. Like, what is the motivation? Moving. Why do they want to move? Like,
You'll see your conversion rates from appointment set to gone on to signed skyrocket if you can get your sales team to master that piece. Because if they don't really know why the person wants to move, they haven't really connected with them. This is just from my experience actually doing this. Then they're not as likely to show up. So you're not going to actually have the appointment, and then B, you're less likely to get the signature. But if you can bring everything back to motivation and you know the true why, the emotion behind the move, then you're winning. It's such a sticky client.
And even if you get them in the car and you're showing them houses and you start to push back on houses, if you don't know the why, you can't dial that in. You could be showing them 100 houses because you don't know their why. If you can dig into their why and tie in the emotion, you can show them 5 houses.
Yeah.
And that goes for
Key.
employees and coworkers too. It's not what they want, it's why they want it.
Yeah, I agree.
I'm rereading this with a team I'm working with right now. If you guys haven't read it in a while, this is like all that. It's so good. Start with why. And it talks about if you don't have why, all you're left with is manipulations. So like price reductions, like to talk the terms of real estate. Like just you have manipulation left. Like I'll meet you anywhere. Like that's a manipulation versus fine. If you've connected with the client's why, they'll meet you at your office every time. If not, you're left with manipulations to get them to behave the way you want them to behave. And that's a waste of time.
put a hold on it at the library, just so you know.
You what?
I put a hold on it at the library.
Oh, nice.
It's a good one. It's a good one. Definitely worth the read.
You guys, I really appreciate this topic. Thank you very much. I really do.
Good. Our pleasure.
Yeah.
Well, I gotta bounce to my next call, but thank you guys for coming and see you next week.
All right.
Yep.
See everyone later.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.